Well, here's a few news stories. Um, so this one we've all heard about. The idea that there are biological labs funded by the United States in Ukraine that are making weapons. This is something that Putin has been trumpeting for weeks, and it's been largely considered to be a clue that he plans to use biological weapons. And somehow they actually tracked down where this came from. And it did not originate in Russia. It originated from one of the originators of QAnon. There are these people, and I think it's an American, who simply make up these stories, which then go viral, which is what led to all the QAnon stuff. And they found the place. And these a pair of anonymous social media accounts were the source of this, which I suppose does not prove that it's not Russia. But they said they planned it. Now they say it's Jacob Creech. They claim to have found it. This person named Jacob Creech made a slew of anonymous accounts, posted these things. The posts spread some before they were blocked, and then they made more accounts and spread them again, and it quickly spread to right-wing media in America and to Putin. And so that's how it goes. Anyway, it's unusual and interesting that they're actually able to track down the source of these things. I've generally assumed that most of them are military operations, and I don't know if this disproves that or not. They certainly function as military propaganda, but the military propaganda might just be exploiting something that some random troublemaker created. So Apple was highly criticized because there was an app put up by Navalny, Putin's rival, and his critics had a plan to vote in a certain pattern as a signal for voting against Putin, which is not directly allowed, and other things like that, and how to coordinate protests, I think, and such. So the Russian government ordered the app stores to take it off in Russia as an illegal app, and Apple did that, but now Apple has restored it. And apparently this is one way to get actual information into Russia. They say if you have data that is downloaded by an app installed on your phone, that I think comes in with end-to-end encryption that the Russians can't break. So they say they do not have a way to stop it. So letting people download that app would be another way to punch pinholes through the Iron Curtain and let some people in Russia get actual information. So this one I was waiting for. I expect a lot of people can do this. I mean, there were videos on January 6th of people going through the door, and sometimes the cops would just wave them through because apparently they were overrun and they were not well organized, and sometimes they didn't know what to do, so they just let people through. And so someone has now gotten off saying, the cops let me in. I thought it was okay, and the judge bought it. So I would imagine a lot more of the January 6th defendants might use a similar defense. I see my color bar is in the yellow often and occasionally even dipping into the red. Let me know if the sound sounds bad and distorted. I could turn down the volume, but I think it's right. I think it has to be kind of loud to be good. Let me know what you think. Anyway, so the House had... Okay, good, thanks. The House had a symbolic vote reaffirming NATO support with a few other features, and 30% of the Republicans voted against it. And they have... so this is a thing to know. I mean, Trump was very much against NATO and very much in favor of Putin. And there are some legitimate arguments to be made here. Noam Chomsky was pretty much against the expansion of NATO. They said NATO promised when they brought in Germany that they would not expand any closer to Russia, and then they did that. So one argument is that we have expanded the borders of NATO too much until we provoked Putin. So anyway, and a lot of other Republicans are just isolationists and say, I don't care about NATO, which is the same thing that happened in America in World War II. Winston Churchill screamed and yelled like Vladimir Zelensky saying, we're dying over here, will you please help us? And that went on for a really long time. It wasn't until Pearl Harbor that America decided to enter the war. So anyway, but there is a considerable amount of Republicans that do not want to be in helping NATO or in NATO or opposing Russia, certainly led by Trump and Tucker Carlson, who have strongly taken that position. So That's why a lot of NATO members have been finally increasing the amount they spend on defense, because it's extremely clear they cannot count on the U.S. As soon as November of this year, the Republicans will begin taking power again, and our ability to fund NATO may go down. Anyway, and if Trump goes back in, I imagine we'll withdraw from NATO completely. So Roberts is the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, but since the 3 new Trump judges have gone in, and the conservative majority is now overwhelming 6-3, they are doing things that even Roberts can't stand. And what they're doing is these shadow docket rulings, which are supposed to be only for emergencies, where they issue a ruling without bothering to have arguments and without having a written document explaining it. And these are often very controversial, and the latest one was clearly not an emergency. In order to have an emergency ruling, you must explain how one of the parties is going to suffer irreparable harm, and emergency action is required, and this ruling did not even have that section written at all, and yet 5 of the conservative justices ruled on it with a shadow docket with no explanation, and when people criticized it, Amy Coney Barrett went out and said, well, if you want to understand it, read the explanation we attached, and there is no explanation attached. And this reminds me of the one that came out yesterday, where Kavanaugh made a ruling, and he said, we're ruling on this because the Supreme Court already decided it previously, when they absolutely had not decided it previously. So we are disturbingly getting close to nations with just fake courts that just make fake rulings that make no sense. And, it's as far as I can tell, the Supreme Court is now just another branch of, say, the Senate, where there's a political majority that just does whatever they want and doesn't have to explain it. And they have the very thinnest veneer of pretending that there's actually some logic or legal basis to what they're doing. It is very far from the correct role of the court. So Will Smith slapped a comedian, and somebody immediately made a coin to sell a meme coin of it. And of course, the thing about this is, if any kind of big event happens that excites a lot of people, you can make a coin, and that coin will go up for a brief period of time and then crash. And so if you jump in really fast, you might make money until somebody managed to turn like $5,000 into $20,000, then it crashed down to nothing. And that's the world of meme coins. Just a somewhat high-tech form of gambling. You might as well be in Vegas betting on a roulette wheel. And they're explaining how COVID-19 kills people. The disease itself does not damage your lungs much, but it creates a storm of your body's autoimmune system attacking it, and it manages to infect the cells that your body is sending to fight it. So they release like a more emergency signals saying we really need killing agents to come in and kill these infected cells, and that kills a lot of your body's tissues. So it really is kind of an autoimmune response. They're getting to the bottom of how it works. And they say this explains why diabetics and old people suffer so much more, because diabetes and apparently old age also include a lot of inflammation problems, which are your body's immune system attacking your own cells. And so that makes you more likely for these storms of inflammation to be set off. So, makes me think you could treat it with immune system inhibitors, perhaps. Anyway, as they understand it, it'll probably help contribute to treatments. So the Texas has the strictest voting laws in America, and they have now had an election. It's just a primary, but the primary did show that the number of ballots rejected are much, much bigger, like more than 10 times they usually are, and more of them are Democrat than Republican, which is what most of us regard as the point of this. The Republicans pushed through all these strict new voting regulations in the hopes of confusing the Democrats more than it confuses the Republicans, and that appears to have worked, although not to an enormous extent. They say the numbers are down here. They rejected 19% of the mail-in ballots, and that was 14,000 Democrats and 10,000 Republicans. So that will subtract 4,000 from the Democratic side, and that's definitely enough to make a difference in a tight election. So other Republican states that want to pass similar restrictions might be encouraged to do more of that. But this is a primary, which is not standard kinds of voting, and people may learn. The part that is so difficult is they require you to fill in your Social Security number or your driver's license number, and that might not be hard, but you must make sure that matches whatever number you put on some application years ago to get your voting card. So you would have to remember what number you put on something years ago. And of course, I would never pass that test, and I think a lot of people don't pass that test, and that's what you're seeing here. All right. Well, I think that's enough. I'm going to stop this.